Representative Barb Gleim, what is the biggest struggle that you face being a 5-foot tall cattle farmer?
Well, my husband is really the cattle farmer,
Okay.
but we do rotational crop grazing. We have about 70 head of Hereford beef. And so when we have to move all those cattle from one field to another, I assist. And so it can be intimidating. I have some pictures I could show you. But it's fun. And of course we have, chickens, and we have other things on the farm where they're easier tasks that I tend to do. And I also do all the books. A lot of the women, that are married to these cattle ranchers do the books for them. And it's time consuming. So that's I guess I could say my second job.
So when you're assisting with moving these cattle, how much do these cattle weigh, like the upper range of it?
Oh, 1,200 pounds.
1,200 pounds?
Yeah,
Wow.
on average.
Okay.
We've got moms all the way down to babies, and we've got some bulls in there, so.
You've entered the smoke-filled room, where we cut through the haze of Harrisburg politics and get to examine the laws and lawmakers that really drive the discussion.
Representative Barb Gleim, thank you so much for joining us today. Despite your short stature, you pack a mighty punch for your constituents of the 199th Legislative District. Tell me about your district. Who are your constituents?
So we have Carlisle Borough proper, which is a little more on the liberal side. I would say mostly Democrat leaning, which is the center of the district of the 199th. But everyone on the outer skirts are more rural, farming, especially to the west. I go all the way to the western line of Cumberland County, almost to the tunnels out there. Hopewell, Newburgh area, which are, we have a lot of farmers. It's very, mostly agriculture in my district. I went to the Realtors Association, and I get that little piece of paper, and it says, they call me Green Acres. I give you a name for the 199th. So the 199th is Green Acres. Given all that, on the eastern side, which is Middlesex Township, which is where I live, it is very heavy industrial there. So I have it all. I have industrial to, the War College and Dickinson College, which is like a college town, all the way to the rural side, which is, a lot of beef farms, dairy farms, and I guess you could say some chicken farming out there too, yeah.
So your district seems to be a very much so a microcosm of the Commonwealth in general.
It is.
What is that like, having to represent such a diverse group of people?
I love it. I mean, I have every issue under the sun that comes into my district, from the builders and the industrial and the businesses that need help with their permitting and things like that. All the way to the agricultural end, of needing help there, to the little suburbia where the War College, I get a lot of people there from different countries even that I'm helping, and then the educational side there with higher ed. So I love it.
So you would think that somebody who represents such a diverse group might take the back seat on a lot of issues just because they don't want to do anything that seems to be too far afield on either side of the spectrum, but you are definitely not that person. Do you get a lot of pushback for that, or is it something that you just go, that's Representative Barb Gleim, either you love it or you don't, but this is what I'm going to be?
I always, when I do doors, especially when I do town halls or anything, I like to say, and if you're a one-issue person, then, and I'm against your issue, then you're not going to vote for me, right? But I help everybody. When people come into my office, I don't say, what party are you? They come in, we help them with state issues. But I am who I am, and I'm not going to waver one way or the other based off of an issue. I think that's what the voting process is really all about.
So where did you grow up?
I actually grew up in Maryland.
Okay. I won't hold that against you too much.
Yeah, no. I grew up in Lanham, Maryland, which is in Prince George's County. My dad was a teacher. And then he went on to a Wright curriculum and Cell curriculum. And, but it was a real small we weren't very wealthy. My mom stayed home. She was a stay-at-home mom. So, but it was filled with kids, and we played outside all day from dusk to dawn. And, you know, back in those days, I could say that everybody was free to do that type of thing. We played kickball in the streets. We played, you know, just all day long outside.
Was it a rural area, urban area?
It was urban.
Urban,
Yeah,
okay.
grew up in an urban area, and so I had that. But my parents both came from rural areas.
Okay.
So my mom grew up on a dairy farm in the Allegheny County area of Maryland. And my dad's from West Virginia, a very rural part of West Virginia. So every other weekend we went, you know, and we had the best of both worlds.
Gotcha. So how do you think that affected your upbringing and how you are now as a person, having that experience of living in a urban area raised by rural parents?
Right. I think that it made me well-rounded, right? My next-door neighbor was from India. Her name was Shushma. There were plenty of, you know, people from the Black community there that we played with. You know, it was very diverse in that urban area where I grew up. And then I went to the University of Maryland, too, as a college graduate there, and that was very diverse, you know, College Park, Maryland. But I had the upbringing from my grandparents and my parents in the rural areas, so I got, like I said, the best of both worlds. And maybe that helped make me a little more well-rounded. When I have people coming into my office, I can relate to both.
So did your husband grow up on a farm then? How did you end up getting into cattle farming?
Well, I'm going to step back a little bit because I want to tell you a little bit of a story.
Okay.
So my dad was a businessman, like I said. He started selling and writing curriculum. And when I was 15, he was on a business trip in Chicago, and he was murdered.
Oh.
So that was a crazy time of my life. I will just say my mom didn't have a job, right? And the killer was on the loose. So I went through a period of time in my life where, you know, the family just literally surrounded us in such a loving way, such a supportive way. And so did the community, right? My high school community. I was just out of my freshman year of high school at the time that this happened.
Wow.
And my sports community, all of that, you know, came together to support my family. And they did eventually find the killer who had killed other people, and he's now still in jail.
Good.
But I had that, you know, all hands on deck experience, and meaning that I went and got a job, my brother got a job, we got to try to keep mom in the house, you know, feeling we had a church community
How
that...
old were your siblings?
My sister was 12 and my brother was 17.
Okay. So you're a middle child.
I am the middle, for what that's worth. But I just want to step back and say that sometimes those type of life experiences really shape who you are going forward. And then I'm going to also then talk a little bit about politics in this whole scheme of things, because, you know, I played sports, right, which is why we're going to get to this pretty soon. But in my senior year, after having scholarship opportunities and thinking that this is the way I'm going to get a chance to go to college, Ronald Reagan came into office, and he moved the Social Security age from 21 to 18. So every kid in my senior class whose parent had a single parent who was on Social Security had to enroll in college, okay? In order for their parent to keep Social Security.
Gotcha.
And so I went to school to graduate. I was a good student, by the way. I still had an English to do and a math in order to graduate from high school. But then I had to leave, and I went to the community college to take my 12 credits so I could say I was in college so my mom could get her Social Security. And then I had to come back and play sports. So, and then I went home and did my homework. And a lot, so I didn't sleep a lot. And when I say all hands on deck scenario, like it was just such a tense senior year of my life. Well, then I have to say, because I mentioned Ronald Reagan, and I will mention school district policies too. All of a sudden, I get brought down to the principal's office, and the principal's telling me, you can't play sports, Barb, because we have a school policy that says you have to be in school 3 periods in order to play sports. And I'm sitting there like, it was a time of my life where you just felt like a ping pong ball. Like you get it together and then something else happens. You get it together, something else happens. Luckily, and I will say kudos to teachers out there everywhere. I told this story to the teachers at Cumberland Valley when I was on school board there, that it was a teacher that literally saved my athletic career, who came in and said, just so you know, you're in my 3rd period social studies class, and
Don't
here's
ask
your
any questions.
assignments. And I still had to do some work there in order to hand in assignments. But I tell everybody I was in the first virtual classroom back in those days. So I was able to go and continue to play sports then. But it piqued my interest about, wow, a president of the United States could really impact your life.
Yeah.
Down here in wee little, Maryland, and all of my friends and colleagues as well that had just a single parent at the time. So when I finally graduated and I got accepted into University of Maryland. I thought, well, I'm going to go into government and politics because I'm going to learn more about this whole process of how, these laws could impact your life in such a great way.
So those sports you played in high school, you were one of the first generations to actually experience the effects of Title IX, which was passed in 1972. First of all, what sports did you play?
Well, I mean, if some people are going to laugh about this, but I played softball. I played softball since I could play. I mean, I think since I was 10, I played baseball because they didn't have softball at the time, and then I played softball.
Were you on the boys team for baseball?
Yep, I was. I started out on the boys team until they got the girls team, and then I played on the girls team, and I loved softball. And then I played field hockey in middle school and in high school. And I also played basketball. Now, I wasn't very good at basketball, but at that time, we didn't have all these club teams at the beginning. I did play club. I was on the first FC field hockey team that actually traveled to the Poconos for the summer for the club team, which was fun. It was a great time. But we were good. And in my sophomore year, we went to States, and we got to play at the Naval Academy.
Really?
Yeah, in States. And ever since that, we went to States. We were good. Our team was so.
So what was it like playing sports in that time where you had those opportunities because of Title IX compared to what those who came before you experienced?
So what we started seeing were those opportunities opening up. So women's soccer had just come to our high school. We didn't have women's lacrosse at all, but field hockey was, again, just starting. All of those women teams were just starting, but we didn't have the club teams or the scholarships at the universities. None of that was really available to us at that time. We have come such a long way since when I played sports to when my daughters played sports to even now. There's so much more opportunity. But Title IX opened up so much opportunity for women and sports and college and those type of scholarships.
Well, I guess we should probably preface it with this. What is Title IX?
So Title IX back in 1972 was an mostly educational bill that said that women had to have the same opportunities in education as men, okay? And what that basically did was it opened up the sports teams to say that if you have a baseball team, you have to have a softball team, right? Now, all of that being said, it did take a lot of time for these school districts to be able to afford, and manage the field times and the, transportation and your jerseys
So
and
this
all
didn't
that type
happen
of stuff.
overnight.
It did not happen overnight, is basically what I want to say. But it did open up all of those opportunities, like, look what I might be able to do here in the future. And then, the women that were sports-minded fought for it. And then I also grew up at the time where you were watching Martina Navratilova on TV, Billie Jean King in the tennis world, where they were pushing that envelope and, saying that women should be, have the opportunity to do whatever the men are doing in sports. You started to see more sports in the Olympics for women open up. It was just really an exciting time for me to be growing up in that era.
So what was the journey then from you playing sports, going through that insane experience with your father to eventually and then you said going to study political science at the University of Maryland to becoming a state representative?
So, having no opportunity to being here is quite the journey, isn't it? So I will just say that sports in general, whether you're a man or a woman, gives you a lot of confidence, teaches you how to fight through adversity, helps you be successful in life. I really believe that being an athlete has given me those type of opportunities in my lifetime. Now, I got to Maryland and I had some friends that were on a soccer club team because University of Maryland, NCAA, hadn't been recognized as an official women's soccer team back even in 1982, okay? So I played soccer with the club team because my friends wanted me to play there, and we traveled all over. We had to pay for our own uniforms. We paid for our own transportation. We played Penn State. We played NC State. We played Virginia, and then eventually, in the 3 years that that club team was doing that, the NCAA came in and recognized us as an official women's soccer team.
So you've been fighting for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I can remember going up to the guys who are playing soccer and saying, hey, when are you done? Can we get on here after you're done, And they were great. I've been fighting a long time for Title IX. So, then I was on a school board. I had children. I got married to a farmer. And
So that's how you got into the cattle farm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And but then my kids played sports, my girls, and they had a lot of great opportunities, and they played field hockey. And my oldest actually went on to play for her freshman year in D1. But all that being said, then when Title IX started coming under attack, that's when I kicked right in, because I knew that we could not go backwards on that. It had been too long of a hard-fought battle to get women and girls the opportunities that they have today.
So your first experience of hearing something like that happening, of transgender people going and competing in sports, or where you have biological men competing in women's sports, what was the first instance of that happening that you recall? Was that before you were elected as state rep or after?
It was after.
After.
So it was actually when Riley Gaines and the Leah Thomas whole incident happened that I'm not. It was the day after that there were a group of women athletes on the Republican side that met at the back of the well and said, we've got to do something about this. And so we did.
So, and before we get a little bit deeper into the examples of this happening, we should probably tackle first and foremost, why are sports separated by sex?
Well, because there are biological differences between men and women, and that's obvious. And so you would never know who is the best in that category, because if men continue to play in women's sports, they're just going to win, and you'll just have men's sports. There won't be women's sports anymore. And so that is the dismantling of Title IX. You're literally going backwards. So that's why we knew we had to fight for women in sports. And it's competition. And that's what people can't seem to get through their, they want to say, oh, you're being discriminatory towards the trans community. No, go ahead and be in the trans community. But when it comes to competitive sports, we want to know who the best in their category is. And there are biological differences between men and women, and that is just plain science. I mean, men have bigger hearts and lungs and hands and feet, and, they're not going to change that by any means, just because they identify differently.
You're one of the few people who actually had to play on men's teams because you didn't have that opportunity yet.
Right.
So you know firsthand the advantages that men have in certain sports. What are some of those advantages? Like, obviously, we know that there's biological differences, and anybody who says otherwise, they're probably a little bit too far out there to really be able to have a logical argument with that or a conversation with them. But when it comes down to when you're playing the sport, what are those tangible advantages that males have over women? What are the outcomes of those biological differences?
Well, I mean, they're just stronger in general. Plus, I'm going to just get a little bit into the weeds here, but men process carbohydrates differently as well. They can eat more and sustain more than women can. But just the fact that their lungs can hold more air and their hearts are larger, and their circulation is different, and they're biologically larger in general than women. It just gives them such an advantage. I'll just give you an example. I have so many examples, but we went to states in field hockey on my high school team, and as an exhibition after the game, a male field hockey team came on from the UK, and they just were playing the best women on the field, and it lasted about 5 minutes before we were all bloodied. And we had to put an end to it. I mean, their balls were flying like 80 miles an hour through the air, just by their pure strength of hitting the ball as hard as they could. We just couldn't hit the ball that hard. And you see it in every sport. I mean, you saw it in the Olympics for boxing, right? Where we had trans females playing a real female, and they had to, put an end to it because he was going to kill her. So, and you see it even like in volleyball. There's so many instances where the height and the strength just outmatch a woman in every category. I think actually it was Martina Navratilovan's group that said there's only 3 sports where that doesn't happen, or that you could argue that it doesn't happen. And they are shooting, sailing, and riding.
Okay.
Those are the 3 sports that they identified where there may not be a biological advantage. It just can't happen in pure competition.
One of the most appalling things that we've heard coming out of this trend now of transgender, I always get the terms mixed up, of transgender females, biological men playing against women, is those biological women who are forced to compete with these people, they're oftentimes told to shut up.
Oh, yeah.
What message do you have for those women who are told to pipe down when they try to speak up for their own safety?
Well, we have a lot of really brave athletes right now that are touring the United States and talking to girls like the Riley Gaineses and the Paula Scanlons of the world who are telling their stories. And they're basically telling these women and girls, don't allow it to happen. It's not fair. So we can talk about the fairness side of this, where the biological male is going to win, whether it in most of the sports on the head-to-head. Okay, especially you see it in track, you see it in swimming, and so don't stand for it. It's not fair. You're losing opportunities. You're losing awards and placements on podiums. So just the general fairness part of that is one aspect. But then there is the aspect where it's physically unsafe. Okay, so you've seen the guy that spiked the ball in volleyball and she became paralyzed, the woman on the other side of the net. You've seen in a lot of the sports where it is physically dangerous to be competing against.
Broken orbital bones.
Yes.
Yeah, especially
Yes.
in combat sports. It's
Yes.
insane.
Okay. So you have the physical aspect, and then you have also the mental aspect of having to change in a locker room in front of a male. That to me is the privacy issue, where they say, "Well, you're discriminating against the trans community." No, you're discriminating against women. Okay, and that this should not be allowed. And then they're told, well, be quiet about it. Don't talk about it. Just handle it. And then you have girls then, like Paula Scanlon talked about, changing in broom closets and someplace, being displaced out of that camaraderie in a locker room with, the women. So it just, there's just a lot of different aspects of this that we need to address. It shouldn't be happening at all. And again, maybe a third category is something that we could come up with to allow, the trans community their particular competitive sport. But again, I'm going to say that competitive sport is biological. It's not about identity. So
you touched on this here. What is you are dictator of the world. Dictator. What is his? Never mind. Anyways, you're dictator of the world. What is your solution to solve this? Without getting into the actual legislation that's been proposed, what in an ideal world is your solution?
Well, I think we've already had a solution. The solution was Title IX. We need to keep Title IX, where men compete against men and women compete against women. And then if there is a trans community that wants to compete, they have their own category, or they just compete in the category of what their biology actually says. Because, all of the I call it in sports, competitive sports, doping. I know that I've had a lot of pushback about that, but just because you're trying to get your nanomoles and your testosterone down to a woman's level does not take away the biological advantage that you have. And so for me, you just need to compete and stay healthy. Stay healthy. You can still identify, but compete in the biological category in sport.
So what would you do with the biological women who are taking testosterone and other steroids? What would you do with them who wanted to play sports? Because obviously biological women who are playing women's sports who aren't transgender, if they go and do that, that's, like you said, that's doping. Those
Right.
performance-enhancing drugs. What do you do with those who are using similar things or things that will have similar effects in their transitioning process?
Yeah, well, I would just say that if they're competing, they can't do that. If they really want and are interested in the competition, okay, you need to compete in the biological category where you are. We know that in order to compete at, NCAA, Olympic level, your testosterone levels for a woman cannot be higher than 5 nanomoles, or you get kicked out. We learned that even through the swimming back in the Olympics. You might be too young to remember, but there were a bunch of Russian swimmers that got kicked out because they were elevating their testosterone levels for a competitive advantage. But I would just say, if competition is that important to you and you really want to play a sport, then you need to adhere to the rules of that sport. And you need to play in the category of your biology, not your identity.
So let's get into the counter arguments here. And I'm going to play devil's advocate here. And it's going to be pretty easy because there's not very many counter arguments that are pretty legitimate. But when you say that if you want to compete, and biological females who want to transition to being transgender men, when you say that they cannot use those drugs if they want to compete, a lot of people are saying that you are taking away, in their words is usually life-saving medical care. What do you say to that?
Well, no. I mean, then you just play sports that's co-ed, or you play in those fields where you can do that, okay? Like riding or sailing or something like that. Or you go and you compete at a local level that is not at that competitive level. Do you understand what I'm saying? That is, there are sports out there that anybody can play in. But if you are serious about competing and winning, then you're going to have to abide by the rules of the day. Or, go through your own Title IX fight as a trans community and create your own category. But don't come into the category of women who have had this fight all along and water it down. Because that's basically what they're doing. And you're not really seeing that many trans males winning in the male category. I mean, you're just not.
I can't name you a single example.
Because, and the reason being is because biological males have a physical advantage. It is indisputable. So let's keep, the competitive sports in the way it is, so that we have a fair playing field for women, fair playing field for men, and if somebody from the trans community really wants to rise to that competitive level and go outside of their local, sports teams, then you need to either compete in the biology that you were given by God, or you start your own competitive sport category.
So one of the other counter arguments is, and it's obviously a fallacy appeal. It's an appeal to novelty, right? They're saying that it's not happening. It's very rare that it's happening. How rare actually is it?
So I think the last article I read said that just in Pennsylvania, I think there's over 1,000 biological males that were attempting or did compete in a female category. But here's what I'm going to say to that argument. And I've been saying this for 5 years. One is too many.
Okay.
One is too many. One opportunity taken from a woman in the female category is too many. It's discrimination. Title IX is there for a reason. It is to provide women with an avenue to compete in sports and be successful and go on to have a podium share, have success later on in life. One is too many. You cannot have somebody that has played a sport since they were 5 or 6 and, rise to that level of national or state competition to just have it taken away by somebody who is identifying.
One of the other arguments we often hear is this is a solution in search of a problem, and that, who cares? They're not hurting anybody. They're not affecting you. What do you say to that?
Well, they are hurting people, and we've seen it, and we know it, right? They are hurting people. I think that's just a way to swish it away, to, get the people that want their own category to go away and not pay attention to it. But now it's gotten to the point where you cannot not notice it. I mean, we just saw the Olympics and some of the things that were just so unfair. So competition needs to be fair. And so it's not going to go away.
The last point that they have, and the left typically will revert back to this, is through personal attacks. When there's no other logical arguments left, they go and attack you personally. They call you a bully. They say that you're transphobic. What do you say to them?
I would just say, no, I'm not. All right? I mean, I don't like to call names. I'm not going to call them a name back. I mean, that's, I grew up in the era of sticks and stones. So I'm just going to keep, showing the facts, showing that it is hurtful, encouraging them to, find a different avenue. If they really love sports and they want to compete, find that different avenue, just like we did back in 1972 through 82, right? We went through that hard time and that hard fight. And so don't take it away, right? Don't do that. So I have no, anger or animosity. I'm just trying to fight for fairness and fight for women and both their mental and physical health and the fairness in competing.
So in May of this year, 2025, the Senate passed Senate Bill 9. What is Senate Bill 9?
So Senate Bill 9 is a lot like what we've been fighting for since 2021, that we got passed through the House and the Senate, and Governor Wolf vetoed. But it basically says that, we are going to compete in Pennsylvania based off of your biology, not your identity. So if you are born a biological male, you're going to be playing in boys and men's sports. If you were born a woman and a girl, you're going to play in girls' sports. There's a co-ed section there that says, if you are identifying, you can play obviously in a co-ed sport, but we're not. It definitely lays down the line between the two.
So that's been, like I said, that was passed in May. Where is it now? What has the journey been?
Well, the journey for Senate Bill 9 has, after it passed the Senate, it came to the House, and it went to House Education, and under Chairman...
The committee.
The committee. And after Chairman Schweier, basically did not call the bill up, wouldn't call the bill up, after 15 session days, you're allowed to do a discharge resolution.
Gotcha. And sorry, before we go into the weeds of that,
Okay.
Can you explain to me typically the process of how a bill, after it passes one chamber of the General Assembly, so let's just say a bill passes the Senate,
Okay.
and it now comes to the House, how does that bill eventually make it to the governor's desk? Typically.
Right. So it'll come through the Speaker's desk, and she will assign it a committee. And our Speaker assigned the Senate Bill 9 to the Education Committee of the House. And typically then a bill will be, brought up for a vote. In this case, it was not. And so there are rules in the House that say after 15 session days, if a bill is not brought up, and it is a pretty high profile bill especially, and we have the right as the minority to do a discharge resolution where we get signatures and we announce our intent to discharge it out of committee. The majority party then can meet in committee and reassign it, and that's what happened.
So a discharge resolution is, how many signatures do you need for that?
25.
25. So 25 signatures from either party, just one party?
Either party, one party, didn't matter. We just needed 25 signatures.
So after 25 signatures, they are then forced to bring it up for a vote in committee, correct?
No, it actually goes to the House floor.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so it pulls it up out of committee onto the House floor.
Gotcha.
But it has to remain there for 2 days,
Okay.
which gives the other side a chance to actually do something with it before it gets called up on the House floor. So that's their window to meet in committee and reassign it someplace else or vote on it. They have a chance to vote on it in committee then as well if that was their intent. But their intent is to not call up this bill.
So you guys do a discharge resolution for Senate Bill 9. When was this approximately?
Oh my gosh. I would say May.
May? Okay. So it's discharged, comes to the House for a vote, the House floor for a vote, correct?
Well, it can, but it didn't.
Okay.
As soon as we discharged, Chairman Schweier met or brought the House Education Committee together
Okay.
and made a vote in committee to reassign it to a different committee.
And what does that mean for the bill then? What does that do?
Well, it gets re-referred, meaning, so they re-referred it to Health Committee.
Okay.
So they're just passing the bill around to committee, even
Now,
after a discharge.
once it's reassigned to a committee, then what happens to that process? Are you back to square one?
Yep. So 15 legislative days, and we discharged it again out of health. And then the health committee met in that 2-day window and re-referred it to judiciary.
So we're getting into the weeds a lot here with this.
Right.
What all of that mean? What does all of that mean?
It just
What
means
are the
that
Democrats
the Democrats are using a tactic so that they don't have to vote on the bill. They are passing the bill around from committee to committee so they don't have to vote on it.
So when it passed out of the Senate, it received bipartisan support. I believe there was, 5 or 6 Democrats who voted in favor for it. Why doesn't Democrat leadership want to bring up this act to save women's sports?
I don't know. If you had the answer to that, I would love to have the answer. Actually, there were 2 groups that met with Leadership Bradford's office. The first group was Moms for Liberty, and they were told by staff that they weren't even aware of the issue. And then the PA Family Institute met with Leader Bradford, and Leader Bradford told them, and I'm getting this third hand here, but that it's just, in their view, not an issue.
Gotcha. So what do you see the future of Senate Bill 9 being?
Well, I see that we just keep putting the pressure on and letting the voters know this is an 80-20 issue. I mean, we have broad Democrat support for this bill as well. And so we just let the voters know that here are the people that are keeping this bill in committee, keeping it from being passed and sent to the governor's desk. And so in all of this time, they're still putting women and girls in jeopardy, both physically and mentally, and with their future opportunities. So I don't know why it is such an issue for them. It's like I said, a very broadly supported issue.
So what can the average Pennsylvanian do? What can the voters do to help move this along?
They just need to call, Leader Bradford's office and Chairman Schweier's office, because those seem to be the 2 people that have the clamps on this issue and this bill. But I think that if it ever did go to a vote on the House floor, just like it did in the past, it would pass, because I think there would be some Democrats that would vote for it.
So you mentioned that this is an 80-20 issue, meaning 80% of Pennsylvanians support this bill.
That's right. It has been polled numerous times.
We recently heard a couple months ago, Governor Shapiro stated that those who support this bill are extremists.
Right.
What do you think? Is he calling 80% of Pennsylvanians extremists when he says that?
I think so. I think he is. But again, we go back to the sticks and stones. When there's nothing left, they have to call you names. And I just don't think he wants the bill on his desk. He doesn't want to have the loud minority, banging on his door. And
Why?
He's running for office, just like anybody else, and doesn't want to have that piece as a part of his campaign. I would say that. And in general, maybe he really believes that there's maybe he's discriminating against women. Maybe he really is discriminatory towards women. And I think that's something that really hasn't been called out so much, but that's the only mindset that I can think of where he wouldn't be supportive of this bill.
So you assume, we can only assume then that should the House pass this bill, Governor Shapiro is going to end up vetoing it.
I think he would pass it.
Really?
I do. It's an 80-20 issue.
Gotcha.
He just doesn't want to have to deal with it. The minority in this issue are loud. You know, they want their, what, you know, quote unquote, right. I know that the governor has usurped his authority through the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission and trying to change the definition of sex so that it would impact this bill. So he, you know, he wants to try to change it through different means so that it doesn't become an issue. But we are suing him over that action. And we'll see.
Can you get into that a little bit? What does that mean?
So the governor, the executive branch, used the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission to try to change the definition of sex so that it's not biological grounds that you can identify as a woman under the term sex through the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. And we caught it, he's going around the legislature, in other words, and trying to subvert the legislature and the definition of what is a woman, basically, and what is determined as the definition of sex. We caught it, we sued, that is still pending, and we'll see what the outcome of that is. But we do know that he has taken some subversive actions to try to tamper down the issue a little bit. But I don't think it's gonna win the day, and I think that, you know, we have, you know, now we have the top coming down, like the Olympic Committee now is coming down and saying, okay, yeah, we're going to compete on biological sex, not by identity. And then this is going to then translate down into the NCAA. And I'm hoping, you know, that this issue goes away along with President Trump's executive order already saying that no men should be competing in women's sports. So I'm optimistic, let's say.
Well, we see, or at least we used to see, maybe this is changing now, but I remember when this whole new modern gender theory was coming in and being introduced, we had the authority figures on that topic saying that sex is biological and is assigned at birth, and gender is a social construct. Are they starting to blur those lines now? Are they now changing their mind on that?
Well, they've been trying. I mean, that's basically what they're doing through Title IX and the Supreme Court, you know, and through the courts is trying to change that definition of sex to gender identity. They're trying to stick that, you know, that other, term in there that is protected. Okay, so if it's protected, then there's not much that you can do about it when you're competing in sports. And so the definition of sex is really important here, especially when it comes to competitive sports. But yes, I mean, we're pushing back on that. We are, you know, starting to get some, gaining some ground there so that Title IX is protected. And so I know that what the theme back 5 years ago when we first started this was saying if you don't, the psychiatric community especially was at odds with each other because we were doing hearings and you would get one psychiatrist coming in and saying, no, that you should be, you know, making sure that you're separating biologically, you know, that there's a reason we do that in the world to make things fair. And then you had other psychiatrists coming in and saying, but if you don't, then there, you know, there's this suicidal tendency that might be increased. Well, as studies started boring out, we realized that it really didn't have anything to do with competitive sports at all. That, you know, whatever dysphoria that they were being, identified with really didn't have much to do with the competitive sports area. And I think that's why you're starting to see the pendulum swing back a little bit.
What was happening to those psychologists who are coming out and essentially stating, men are men and women are women, and the ones who were saying that people who end up transitioning have no effect, their transition has no effect on their attempted suicide rate, which is, last I checked, usually hovers around 70%, which is a higher number than any other demographic that we see.
Right.
What happens to those psychologists who point that out, saying that this is not helping those people, that this is only continuing
Right.
to
So
hurt them?
Dr. Brown, and he testified in our hearing, I guess it was 4 years ago, and has since been backed up by other really reputable doctors, is saying that there's a temporary relief after, let's say a trans female is allowed to play in a sport or do the things that they want to do, but then they eventually, again, revert back like 10 years later into, suicidal tendencies. So it's just a real temporary fix. They really need to start treating dysphoria, and then finding.
Well, are they not already treating it with what they call life-saving drugs? Are you saying that those life-saving medical care is not actually life-saving?
Right, that's what they're finding out. Yeah,
Gotcha.
changing your outer look is not really helping the mental aspect of what's going on there. After all the studies that they've done. So, we sit there and we read what the experts say and what they find out, and we obviously have a lot of sympathy and empathy for what's going on there. But at the end of the day, we really need to protect women's sports and the fairness and competition. Maybe again, going full circle here, we provide an extra category there, or we provide another avenue for sports for those identifying differently. But at certain collegiate and high school competitive sports levels, we really need to know who the best in the women's category is, and then laud that woman for
What is a
her
woman?
achievement. What is a woman? Well, I would absolutely say that a woman is somebody that is that has the biological XX chromosome versus the XY, right? Somebody that can have a baby naturally. I'm not going to get into the medical definitions here, but I think that we all really know what a woman is, and that, years of trying to water that down isn't going to work, especially when it comes to Senate Bill 9.
Last question for you. The left seems, and we see this with Governor Shapiro, we see this with House Democrats. Since Senate Democrats were forced to vote on it, they kind of flip-flopped either way. But it seems like they have Democrats in general seem to adhere to a very strict dogma of, this is a talking point, you stick with it. It's almost a religious following. And frankly, I think it's pretty much the only religion that the Democrats don't openly mock. What does that strict adherence to talking points, when they go against every basic logical point anybody could ever make, what does that say about that ideology in general?
Well, the first thing I'll say is that it's not commonsensical at all. It's not common sense. It's not, quote unquote, following the science. I mean, a female is a female and a male is a male. There are only two genders. It just seems to be that they just want to push an ideology that really is not adherence to anything. It's just in order to sow chaos in so many levels, both the religious level. I mean, I can get into all the ideological parts of this, breaking down the family unit, teaching children at an early age that maybe they all have a social, emotional learning, awareness, when they just need to be kids. and then teaching them also that your parents might not be right all the time, which is not healthy for a family as well. I mean, I think that it's all related. It's all interconnected towards a government that is not by the people and for the people.
Representative Barb Gleim, thank you very much. And for all of you at home, thank you so much for watching another episode of The Smoke-Filled Room. Just so you know, this will be our last episode for this year. We're going to take a 2-week break for the holiday, but we will be back on Monday, January 5th, and we got a bunch of great episodes queued up for you guys to watch. Representative Barb Gleim, thank you again very much.
Thanks for
coming.
having me.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.